I've been watching Transformers all these years and never knew where it started. So I decided, you know what, today's the day. Check out the beginning of Transformers lore. The origin of the Transformers and Cybertron from Comics Explained. I've seen this channel from somewhere, but probably just in passing.
Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, you guys are enjoying. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah. Let's begin. Okay, so as a result of Netflix announcing the Transformers War for Cybertron 3-part anime series, I guess that's coming out, a lot of you guys have been asking for Transformers content. And I gotta tell you, I'm used to like Marvel and DC where the continuities are pretty straightforward. DC's basically rebooted like really 2 times ever. Crisis on Infinite Earths and then the New 52 were the only real true times they just line-wide rebooted everything, new origins, all that kind of stuff. Really like 0 Hour Crisis in Time, Infinite Crisis, and Final Crisis were more like cleaning things up, really kind of like organizing and restructuring what had been done after Crisis on Infinite Earths. And Marvel's never rebooted, right? So it's just been a singular continuity going forward since like 1961 and 62 with Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And so with Transformers,
I didn't know that.
I ended up hitting up a guy named Derek Ruby, right? From the Derek Ruby Show. He's one of the Discord members that we have, and he's really knowledgeable about Transformers. And the way he explained it to me is Transformers has like the Marvel comics and the IDW comics, and I'm pretty sure there's other comics that have been made. You've got the cartoon shows, you've got the movies, and each one of those are their own continuities. But from what he told me, when it comes to the origin of Cybertron, the tried and true accepted origin for the most part seems to be what was covered in Transformers issues 61 and 74 back when Marvel was producing them, right? So in the 1980s and that point in time. And so what
I've been seeing an uptick in people wanting these Transformers comics.
What this tells us, and the details are kind of fuzzy, they're kind of scant here. It's not nearly as easily clear cut as like what Marvel or DC's done, but what it really seems to point to is that in the beginning of all things, you simply had the one, right? This one particular being, this entity, kind of the Marvel equivalent or the Transformers equivalent of like the one above all from Marvel or DC's presence. But essentially,
it's like every single lore has to have their own Emperor of Man type figure.
it kind of had good and evil existing within itself. And then somewhere along the line, and we're not really given details exactly how, at least not within the confines of this comic, but somewhere along the line, Unicron was kind of like this representation of evil and destruction and consumed essentially everything in existence, or at least it seemed to be everything in existence except for a small morsel of reality. And that reality essentially coalesced and then gave birth to a big bang that literally evolved around Unicron. And so with that also came the creation of Primus, who was essentially going to be a kind of antithesis.
Primus is one of my favorite bands. Primus sucks.
To Unicron itself, where Unicron was the agent of chaos and destruction, that Primus was more of an agent of order and structure. And so as a result of that, eventually Unicron woke up and came to this realization that there was all this life around it. And so immediately it ended up in a conflict with Primus. And the idea was that when this conflict took place, Primus, looking to kind of create or kind of maintain order and structure and essentially being a champion of life, more or less, was essentially losing to Unicron, right? And it's one of these things where it really kind of indicates the idea that evil usually always overpowers good. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, and that's kind of one of the cool things that I've seen when it comes to the Transformers, is that at least when you're looking at this, and even the battle between the Decepticons and the Autobots, is kind of this sort of timeless war between good and evil, which one actually wins. The Autobots and Decepticons actually sort of introduced something that wasn't supposed to be there with regards to this whole battle of good and evil. But at the end of the day, the big takeaway from this is that with the fighting that they were having, with Primus knowing that it couldn't actually win, right, that it couldn't actually overtake Unicron because Unicron was simply just that powerful, which again, it makes sense, right? Because when you're talking about life and death, everything dies, right? If those of you guys who remember Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers, everything dies and then everything is reborn again. And I think that's one of the reasons why, if you go and you look at like the Transformers mythos, that one of the things they say is that the reality is that Primus and Unicron will always exist, right? Like good and evil will always exist. I don't know if that's really true or not, but regardless, the way this played out is that with Primus realizing that it couldn't necessarily win, at this point we jump to Transformers 61. And what we end up finding out is that recognizing that it couldn't necessarily win, that what Primus did is it essentially took the conflict between itself and Unicron to the astral plane. Now, for those of you guys who are familiar with like Marvel Comics, the astral plane is not a physical location, right? It's not a physical realm. When you go to the astral plane,
like the Void, or what do they call it in Warhammer? I think Marvel has one too.
plane, your spirit essentially leaves your physical body, right? You can't take a physical presence to that part of existence, right, into that dimension. And Primus essentially knew this. So we're kind of left to believe the astral plane, in terms of as it functions in Transformers, is universal across the board, right? Like an astral plane in Transformers is the astral plane in Marvel, is the astral plane in DC. Not in the sense that they all share the same astral plane, but in the sense that its form and function is the same across all these different properties. And so as a result of that, when this took place, Primus made a gambit. He basically took the conflict to the astral plane, essentially removing their spiritual essences from their physical bodies, and then went back to the physical realm without their bodies, and then immediately sent their bodies flying into like these sort of metallic asteroids, more or less. And so what this did is it is essentially kind of set the bedrock, or the baseline level for what was going to be Cybertron, insofar that Unicron was the first one to tap into what it is that he could do, right? Unicron was the first one, when he was engulfed inside this giant rock, more or less, began to essentially transform it, right? Began to basically modify his body in the way that you guys are familiar with Transformers, in the sense that they change into other things. He began doing that and repurposing the planet, and then basically going on this crusade to basically try to find Primus and destroy Primus. But Primus coming to the realization that so long as he was essentially awake, that Unicron could locate him, track him down, destroy him, and then without anybody standing in his way, wipe out everything in the newly created universe, essentially slumbered. But before doing so, what he did is he created 13 agents, more or less, or 13 individuals, champions, that would fight on his behalf. That instead of being like Unicron and turning himself into one giant planet and then attacking everything, that in creating these 13 soldiers, more or less, he instilled in each of them what was called the spark. And that was the spark of life. That's what brought
the all spark. Is that what they call it now, or is that what it's always been called? I thought that was a new thing with like Michael Bay.
them to life, and then in turn he gave them the ability of what Unicron could do, which was to transform into other things. Now, this is where the part of the Fallen comes into play, insofar that the Fallen turned against Primus and then became an agent of Unicron. But the idea here is that following that, and over time, Primus himself developed into Cybertron and then looked to essentially create an army of individuals who would be able to stand against Unicron. Knowing the 13 were originally not enough, it would take more. And so as the eons passed, what you saw was essentially this kind of proliferation of the Transformers, each of which basically, capitalized and in different ways changed in comparison to the ones that came before. But the reason why Primus hadn't really appeared up until at least this point in the story was because of the fact that Primus was essentially slumbering to, again, keep his presence hidden from Unicron, and all the while kind of monitoring the Transformers themselves until he believed that they were capable enough that he could essentially wake up and then lead them in a war against Unicron and win. The problem with this is that somewhere along the line, we got the Autobot and Decepticon civil war, that essentially these soldiers that were created by Primus ended up in a civil war themselves, and they were fractured. And so knowing that there was no unified front against Unicron, that there's no way they could have won. I don't know if I said unicorn before, I hope I didn't, but nonetheless, it's
Transformers seems way cooler in the comics than it does in the cartoons and movies.
It's a cool concept. Right now, here again, that's the thing to understand here is, from what I gather when it comes to Transformers, and I am by no means nearly as knowledgeable about Transformers as I am about Marvel. I want to get to that point, right? Like, I want to read Transformers and get into it. I'm kind of turning to you guys, right? Those of you guys who are exceedingly knowledgeable about Transformers, throw some information down in the comments, man, because like, I want to learn some of this stuff, and I'm sure
Same.
the fans that I have out there want to learn some of this stuff. But like, we want to know, man. So like, now's your chance. Explain comics to Comics Explained. Like, explain it to me, right? Like, make it make sense to me. But if this really is the generally accepted origin of Cybertron and Transformers, then it makes sense, right? And it's cool. Like, it's pretty interesting. Like, I'm really digging the idea of it. But again, like, what's gone on in recent years, and really for a number of years, is the Transformers always really kind of seem to get rebooted, right? So it's always kind of a reboot, a new continuity. Again, from what Derek was telling me, this is kind of the generally accepted origin. Right now, you have a reboot that was done with Transformers in 2019. That's published twice monthly, right? So it's published bi-weekly, and we're only in issue number 19. So like, if you guys are down with that, like, we can cover it. I don't know, how it compares to everything else that's going on, and because it's still in the early stages, given how long Transformers has gone on for.
And we just got a new Transformers movie, didn't we? Transformers 1, that's like shows the origins of Optimus Prime. Am I getting that right? I haven't seen it yet. I plan on watching it as soon as it comes out on streaming, because can't go see it. It's not playing anywhere around me.
It may be one of these things where they're still building stuff up, but I'm down. Like, I'm down to check it out, right? Like, I'm down to cover it if you guys want to see it. Let me know down in the comment section if you guys want to see that, and I'll bring it to you, right? Because I love Marvel and I love DC, but I'm kind of getting tired of just doing Marvel and DC all the time. Like, I want to do other stuff. Like, I want to cover some other stuff besides Marvel and DC. I get it's not going to be the most popular, that it's not going to get like the most views ever, but at this point, I've got enough other side projects going on that I'm not really worried about the view count on YouTube on my channel anymore. I'm really more worried about just like doing stuff I like, doing stuff I enjoy. I've spent enough time doing clickbait on Comics Explained. Now I'm just doing what I love. The benefits of being a YouTuber that's been around for 5 years, understanding how YouTube works. Anyway, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. And if you are knowledgeable about Transformers, make sure you drop some truth bombs, some fact bombs down in the comments section. And I will catch you all later.
There you go. It's a little bit of Transformers lore if you didn't know that. And I didn't figure there was much of a continuity, but there's continuity in the comics. Kind of. In one version. But we know that all of them have the same beginning. For now. Till one of the movies comes out and it's like, this is the true beginning of Transformers. This is where it all started. I could see that happening. Maybe it'll be good. Who knows?